Our story begins on a distant battlefield, where the sky is cloudy and full of ashes from the flames that are still scattered on the ground. The banners of the royal houses, the bodies and swords of the dead warriors flutter in the wind. The bloody armor strewn across the ground are evidence of the fierce battle that has just taken place. In the distance, 3 figures come into view on the horizon, and as they approach, they are like beasts, with elongated, muscular bodies, hairy backs, sharp teeth, and ape-like faces. These creatures are right in front of the army, which is surrounded by them. It is then that the leader of the creatures shouts, intending to convey fear. Despite wearing large armor and swords to defend themselves, the men's frightened faces are evident. Suddenly, on the scene, a young man is attacked by a group of these mysterious creatures. Their size is in evidence. They are enormous. He stares them in the eye and tells his companions attack. Despite the imminent danger, they decide to confront them. Man and beasts fight fiercely. As the fight progresses, it is revealed that the young man is a skilled and experienced swordsman, and his bravery inspires his companions to fight harder. The battle is intense, both sides fighting to the death in a cavalry war. Bodies fall everywhere, and the ground is stained with blood and ash. The young swordsman leads the charge. As the battle progresses, it becomes clear that only a few will survive. In the end, victory is far from clear, and tension hangs in the air as the fighting continues. 30 long years have passed since that fierce battle, and it is not clear to us who won, although we certainly hope that it was the men and not the beasts. In contrast to the previous chaos, this scenario is completely different. The sun shines brightly, illuminating the majestic castle that stands imposing on a cliff, surrounded by a rushing river and bright green trees. The castle is imposing, reflecting the grandeur and power of its owner, the wise Empress Heller Rose. But the beauty of the place is tarnished by the tragedy that has lived inside. The Empress has lost her sanity and her mind is clouded. In the long corridors of the castle, 2 soldiers drag a bloody prisoner, whose wounds stain the floor as they pass. The scene is desolate and she is turned upside down, just as her world must be today. Dark clouds hovering over the great empire of Kyle, that used to shine with 5 centuries of great history. Kneeling on the ground, the prisoner is closely observed, covered by a robe that hides his face, his hands and feet bound with bloody shackles. The scene becomes even more gruesome as you notice the corpses of 3 loyal subjects who were accused of treason and mercilessly executed. The floor is stained with large pools of blood and their swords and armor lie next to their motionless bodies, a sad symbol that they fought bravely to the end. Only those who spoke the language of the court and could please the Empress had a chance to survive her cruel trial. At the end of the corridor, the soldiers arrive at the great door of the throne room, guarded by more than 20 guards. Beside them a tall burly knight who must surely be your royal guard. The soldiers drag the prisoner to the feet of the Empress, forcing him to kneel before her. With a weak voice and a tired face, the prisoner tries to speak. The Empress, however, gives him a cold and indifferent look before speaking to him, then says, "Yuma," addressing the prisoner. It is there that we realize that it is the same young man who faced 30 years before the terrible beasts. He continues saying that he incited Marlon Zark to commit treason. Right, so the Empress would refer to Yuma. He answers yes. With what little breath he had left, he addressed the Empress, telling her with his voice trembling, "Your Majesty, I am a simple eunuch." It seemed that he was trying to confuse her, or that he was having 2 conversations at the same time. On the one hand he was defending himself, and on the other hand he was making the Empress understand that he saw that something was not right. He continued telling her that he has no family and no power, unlike the other aristocrats. Yuma's words infuriated the captain of the royal guard, who was about to draw his sword. "How dare you say such a thing to Her Majesty, you abject traitor?" The Empress makes a sign with her left hand to the man to stop and says, "All right. There is nothing more I need to hear." Then she orders him to be beheaded. Yuma's face showed disappointment. Accepting his fate, he closed his eyes. Is this the end? Well, he said to himself, if I'm going to die, so I might as well try my luck. Very carefully he took out of his chained hands a small blackberry fruit. This is a fruit of regression. It will bring you back to the past, although I don't know how many years it will take you back, so it all depends on luck. Besides, you will die as soon as you eat it. This memory came to Yuma's mind from when he was much younger. A man also in uniform, whose face we cannot see nor do we know his name, said these words to him. Annoyed by the gentleman's offer, Yuma shouted loudly, "Why are you giving me poison?" And the man replied, "I'm just giving you the opportunity to see your little friend again," referring to his member, because eunuchs do not have bastards. Yuma replied, annoyed at such mockery. All this had come to his mind, that conversation he had had before, and he realized that it was necessary to use this fruit. "Her Majesty, who used to be intelligent and beautiful," said Yuma at the same time that, with her head bowed, her hands covering her face, She ate the purple fruit that this man had given her. What is it that has changed you so much, he wondered. To his mind came a memory of the young empress smiling and beautiful. What has made you so afraid? Dying little by little after having eaten the mulberry. Delivered already without strength, he looks into the empress' eyes and says to her, "Your Majesty, stay healthy." Between his teeth, Yuma tried to say something to the empress again but was interrupted at that moment because he began to vomit blood. The empress, upon seeing him, is startled and begins to call for help in desperation. However, the captain of the guard looks at her and stops her, suggesting that it is too late to do anything. Already tended to on the ground, almost dying, Yuma says with a last effort, "I'll be back." His voice is barely a whisper and his body so weak that he can barely move his lips. Yuma collapses to the ground. Finally, Yuma dies. To return to the past and change everything. Mist and darkness hover over our sight. Suddenly a ray of light is appearing again on the scene, revealing a beautiful landscape. The brightness of the sun passes through the branches of the trees, illuminates the whole place. Slowly Yuma is opening his eyes, feels strange. He looks around and says, "This place is Peril, my land." It is a beautiful village next to a beach surrounded by boats on the dock. The protagonist cannot believe it. Immediately next to him observes a bucket with water and does not hesitate to look at his reflection. Still surprised, he says to himself, "I went back exactly 40 years in the past, but the most surprising thing is that he can remember everything that happened so long ago. For him it is as if it had been yesterday." Still surprised by his trip back, he walks remembering that past that he is reliving and is discovering his surroundings. Later he comes across a man lying down resting in a meadow with his 2 cats. When he sees him, he apparently recognizes him and tells him that Malin has gotten into trouble. Is Mr. Haka. Mr. Haka tells him who Malin has hit this time. I'm sure he already guessed. And Yuma replies that it was the owner of the fish market, named Cage. But at the same time Yuma lets Mr. Haka know that it was because Cage spoke badly about you, so don't scold him too much. Then Mr. Haka gets up from his comfortable nap and asks him where is he, referring to Malin. Yuma replies that he is probably taking a nap. The two walk down to the beach. Mr. Haka says to Yuma, "There he is." The two of them see him lying in the distance. When they reach the place where Malin is, Mr. Haka grabs his ear and tells him that so much has happened while Yuma sees him and only remains silent. He keeps pulling his ear. While all this is going on, Yuma looks at them and smiles, thinking it's good to see them all back together. Lord Haka was the one who adopted them when they had no family, understanding that he has a second chance. But this is no time to rejoice. The world will soon be dragged into a merciless war and all the things I loved will be destroyed. However, it's different now. If necessary, I will climb the highest position to protect everything dear to me, Yuma promised himself, his little one, referring to his limb as he remembered the day he lost his manhood. But tomorrow a gentleman will arrive in town who is the one to blame for Yuma losing his manhood. Yuma knows that he must prevent Malin and Miro from meeting since they will have a duel, and if they do, it is very likely that Malin will win. While he is thinking this, his brother Malin opens the door and tells him, "Yuma, tomorrow a gentleman is coming to the fish market. Let's go and see." At that moment Yuma scratches his head because he knows it's all going to be repeated. Malin excitedly tells him, "Let's ask the gentleman to show us everything. He could write us a recommendation if we do well." Malin looks excited. Of course, he doesn't know everything that is coming. Yuma in a very skillful way tells him let's not bother him. He comes here to take a break. Then Malin keeps insisting, "What are you talking about? When else will we see a gentleman?" At that, in order to distract him, Yuma jumps up and kicks him in the chest, telling him, "I think Mr. Haka's lessons are good enough." Then Malin strikes back and grabs him by the waist and throws him to the ground, telling him father's lessons are not good enough. They are not the advanced skill. Both brothers continue practicing with each other and laughing as they do so. The next day, inevitably, Yuma and Malin meet the knight who tells him a story of how he won his battles, telling them that he was able to win because he was prepared to die. Of course, that is the duty of a knight. The man dressed in his armor looks very arrogant and likes the attention that the boys are giving him. Until that moment, a knight points out that the boys like him talk and joke around. The knight tells Mr. Cage that he was right to listen to his advice. It is at this point that the gentleman asks the boys, "I heard you guys learned fencing. You want to show me?" The knight's intention was to somehow humiliate them. He thought he would easily beat them both. Malin, with glittering eyes, tells him, "It would be an honor for us. I'll be a eunuch again if Malin wins this time. I have to make him lose no matter what." Yuma approaches Malin and asks him, "Are you planning to win?" "What the hell? You better lose no matter what." Malin, still surprised, tells him, "Yuma, how am I going to win? What are you talking about?" "But I will give my best effort." Yuma tells him, "You will win. But you will lose, okay? If you win, I will kill you." Neo still thinks he is overestimating him. He laughs and jokes with him. He makes him understand that he thinks he has no chance of beating a real knight. Yuma is worried because he realizes that Mayo is not listening to him. The knight and May are already on the battlefield. The knight and May test each other. Both have wooden swords. The knight tells him, "Let's see how much you have learned." The boy jumps with excitement and tells him, "I will do it in 1 or 2 moves right away." Disarm the knight. He is shocked. He can't believe it. From afar I watch me thinking I knew it. At all this, the knight is offended and tells Malin, "Coward, how dare you attack?" distracting a knight by shouting first. Yuma takes the opportunity to yell at him from afar, "Someone like you shouldn't have the opportunity to train with a knight." Trying to persuade him not to continue, the knight laughs and mocks what is happening, then starts saying that Marion is a coward, and that can also be a method of defense. In the end, Yuma manages to stop the encounter, and the knight invites him to have a beer with Mr. Haka. Once they were alone, Yuma and his brother Marlin made fun of the gentleman, realizing that he was simply a fat aristocrat who was just showing off his social status. Yuma, realizing that his destiny had changed and now everything was different, felt at ease. At the tavern, the gentleman and Mr. Haka were drinking beer and laughing. At that moment, Miro said, "The beer is good, but we are missing something." Mr. Haka asked him what he meant. "Well, you know," the gentleman answered. At that moment, a maid enters with a tray of fish and says, "Here is the fish you asked for, sir." The gentleman stares at him strangely. Meanwhile, outside and back is already Malin and Yuma are walking towards the tavern when suddenly Yuma says, "Wait, something feels wrong." At that, both young people turn to the window of the tavern. Inside it, at the table where they are, the gentleman and Mr. Haka notice that the girl is being harassed by the disgusting man. This takes her waist of the hand, tries to kiss her. Mr. Haka is outraged, but as in this society everything is about status, he can't do anything. Marlon from the outside doesn't think the same. Both young men enter the tavern shouting, "Father, why do you stand alone and watch?" Both boys confront the knight and tell the young lady to leave the place. The knight Miro is arrogant and tries to threaten the boys. However, they want to seek revenge and hit the knight hard. He tells them, "I will report them." Hitting a knight is punished severely. A cat immediately kneels down and tells him, "I would like to see a gentleman complain after being beaten by a poor guy." The gentleman realizes that somehow he would lose out if he says anything. Yuma tells you it's just garbage. Get out of his sight and runs away scared. Marlon and Yuma feel happy and joyful about what you just did, while Mr. Jackass reprimands them for what they did and tells them that they should have stuck it out and asks him, "Then you were going to leave Maria like that? I'm disappointed in you." Father turns around with angry eyes and asks him, "What did you say?" At that, Yuma tells him, "Malo, father, you are right. If something had gone wrong, it would not only have been dangerous for us, but also for Maria. Now get your things, we have to leave town." Before leaving, Yuma tells Senator Jaka to go to the Lord where Marie is so that he can protect him too. His father, surprised, asks him how he knew that the Lord is in favor of the commoners. "What are you going to do?" "Don't worry about me, I'll go to the capital. I know someone who can solve this." Then his father, Lord Haka, understands that young Yuma has a purpose and hands him his sword, warning him, "I must give you this burden." Time later, Yuma gets himself back to the castle where he worked for 40 years. He feels happy to be back, and even more so now that he is not a union. At that moment there is a flashback and he remembers when the Empress showed him a secret passageway in case he was ever escaping, even if it was because of her, to which Yuma smiles. He looks at her and says, "Okay, I'll do it. I will do it," without looking back. Empress also smiles and tells him okay if it was this way, while squeezing one of the blocks of the outer wall of the castle, which collapsed to open a secret passageway. After this, a small door opens at the bottom of the wall of the castle. Some enters crouching with much effort, scraping and rubbing with the stones around him. While doing so, he is thinking that he would like to see the Empress of his youth. However, he realizes that he has already committed several crimes: attempted murder of a knight, blasphemy, instruction in Imperial Castle. Surely for that they would tear off even his limbs. That's why then Imor decides better to turn back. He remembered that the Empress likes to take long walks in her garden and decided to see her from a high point, but at that moment he is surprised with a sword on his neck. A silhouette of a dark knight is who holds him. Suddenly it is revealed that it is Captain Barris of the Royal Guard of the Empress. This still holding him prisoner asks him, "Who are you?" while he squeezes the sword harder on his neck, making a small cut that spills some drops of blood. At that moment you hear the voice of a mysterious figure who comes with a cloak into the forest. Stop bars. As he finishes speaking, the character removes his hood and reveals to be a beautiful young girl with brown hair and lilac eyes. Is the first Imperial Lady Zishukaro. This is crazy to invade the castle right in front of the first princess and the Imperial Guard. Immediately the young Yuma realizes that something is suspicious. He kneels down and says, "My name is Yuma. I came to this place for work," to which the Princess Zishuka replies, "You said you came all the way here for business, but you don't come in through the front door but through the back mountain like a rat. Why do you do that?" The young Yuma answers that when he was a child at the age of 7 his parents died in a magical attack and that he was saved by an imperial magician, so he came here to thank him. At that moment Lord Barrys advises the princess that this man is very suspicious and that it is better not to listen to anything else, to which the princess replies, "Lord Barrys, who gave me permission to speak. He bows his head and apologizes to the princess for what he had done, but the princess laughs and says I'm joking. And she asks Yuma if she knows what the name of that magician is. Yuma says yes, I have heard that his name is Adeline Woods. Then the princess says okay, I will give her your thanks, but don't come near this place again. Invading the castle will be punishable by execution, so young Yuma says yes, thank you very much, as the princess walks away and goes back into the forest. Luckily for him, he narrowly escaped from this situation, and he began to reflect and think that the princess is the kind of person who never forgets even the smallest details. That is why the young Yuma sets out to find the wizard at all costs, because he knows that in another year the princess will reveal herself against Dawn, and it will be Barry's himself who will defeat her, and the princess will be the one to defeat her. Barry's himself who will defeat her and execute her by cutting her with his sword in the back. That's why he thinks that at this moment they are surely in a static relationship. Several questions crossed his mind. What were these two characters doing near a manure treatment plant? What would they have to hide? He wondered if there was something between them. But for now he cannot focus on them. He must fix the problem that happened with the night grouper. And he goes to look for a merchant named Fong, who is in charge of trading luxury furniture and magic crystals imported from the kingdom of Helga that are the most outstanding. Although a few years later the merchant manages to manufacture his own diamonds, this makes his business become the largest in the kingdom. To take the building where the merchant Fong is located, the guards stop him. He tells them that he is coming to see the merchant Fong, and the guards laugh at him, mocking him. He pulls out his sword and cuts one of the guards' spears in half, and they are surprised at that. Yuma tells them that he is one of the escorts of the magician Adeline, and they let him pass. At the end, Yuma manages to enter the building, and they sit down to talk directly with Mr. Fong. He introduces himself, telling him that his name. They shared a cup of tea, which the merchant says is very difficult to find because it is from the east. The young man stares at him suspiciously and wonders if this man in front of him is really the real Mr. Fong. As the conversation continues, the merchant asks him, what can I do for you, Yuma? To which he replies, I am here to make a deal. I will teach you how to make magic stones. Mr. Fong, who was drinking his tea, immediately from astonishment spat out his drink. I more took the opportunity to tell him that he is not really an escort of the magician Adeline Woods, but rather a commoner. Then when Mr. Fong tells him, okay, you said you were someone else, but actually showed more interest in the young man's proposal to teach him how to make magic stones. Surprised because he said that was impossible, the Empire's Magic Academy would already know before him. In response, the young man tells him that to prove to him that he is not lying, they will sign a magic contract where if he failed to teach him, he would be their slave and test subject for the magicians. Of course, the merchant knew that he wanted something in return. The young man and asked him, what do you expect you in return for this? Yuma replies, I almost killed the gentleman grouper. Please solve that problem and we will be even. Surprised by his answer, Mr. Fong tells him that this is something that cannot be solved so easily with money alone. But I do not answer him for the moment. Go to the gambling house of the Phobian family. There you will find a gentleman addicted to gambling called Haywin Woods. Take advantage of him. Later, as the young man told him, the merchant sits down to talk to Mr. Haywin, asking him if he had heard about an incident that happened with a commoner and the night Miro, to which the gentleman replies, Miro, just hearing that name makes me sick. I heard that idiot was beaten and kicked by a commoner. Then the merchant explains that it was all a misunderstanding and that the young Yuma is his nephew and that the night Miro had killed the girl. How good merchant knew he had to give him something in return, and before starting to talk had given him a golden armor that left on the table in sight. Luckily for Yuma and Mr. Fong, Miro Knight was not to the liking of Mr. Haywin. This responds, there is nothing more to say, and they close the deal. When Yuma returns to the merchant tells him that everything went exactly as he had told him, and he is relieved. Yuma congratulates him and tells him good job. Creating magic stones is very easy. First, turn the magic stones into powder. Second, sow them as seed in the field. Third, sprinkle them with the blood of the beast. Hearing this, I went away surprised. He asks him that's simple, and young Yuma tells him yes, it's all, but it must be done carefully because otherwise these would explode, for which an archmage is needed. The problem with this is that there are very few in the Empire, to which already Yuma also had a plan and the right person for the job. Leaving there, both go to a ball full of aristocrats in search of Phobia, who was adopted by the Phobian family thanks to his natural talent for magic. But despite being among the aristocrats, he is discriminated against because of his plebeian ancestry. But the archmage is indifferent and tells him that if he needs the power of the Phobian house, he should look for it elsewhere. The young Yuma had already told him what he had to say to gain his attention. The only person I wanted to see here was Lord Care. There is nothing to do with people who believe in their lineage and take pride in it, said the merchant. This made the archmage smile, and he changed his mind immediately, allowing him to hear what the merchant wanted to tell him. Yuma is satisfied. The image is almost finished, But he knows that the Magic Kingdom is probably the best place to cultivate the field of magic stones, and he knows he must borrow the earth to entrust the Black Wolf with the mission of escorting it. The magical realm is the only one that has not been conquered by the Empire despite many attempts. This was largely because it was home to a group of mercenaries called the Black Wolf. I knew that the chance of them discovering their magical planting there was minimal. That is why the three men decide to undertake the journey to the far reaches of the magical realm, idea that is not much to the liking of the merchant, who is quite fearful and thinks that Yuma and the Archmage tease him by telling him that they would die together anyway and that one of the three of them has offspring. Despite their fear of the journey, they manage to arrive safely at the House of the Black Wolves, a huge stone fortress with a large sphinx of a wolf at its entrance. The merchant Fwang is surprised and thinks that there is no one in the place, but at that very moment they are intercepted. A sword rests on the shoulder of Yuma. Turning around reveals that it is his brother Malin. Both embrace and are glad to be reunited. Another man who was with Malin threatens the Archmage, placing a sword to his throat, and asks him, "What are you doing with these intruders?" And he replies, "He is a friend I have not seen in a considerable time, so I'm greeting him quietly." At that moment we are presented with a flashback of the moment when Miro ran away, and Yuma tells Marlon that he must go to the kingdom and ask for protection. She hugs him and thanks him because without him she would not have gotten to where she is now. In the bad past he had become the squire of the Knight Homer and his skills with the sword had improved a lot. After a while a nobleman named Duranjak took notice of him and made him his adopted son. But he still did not feel alone, and a commoner who became the adopted son of a nobleman aroused much envy in others around him. Malin knew that if he became a knight all his income would still go to pay for equipment, and most of the time he would be sent to the battlefield. In the end the aristocrats do everything they can to expel the commoners, so he was asked to choose the path of the mercenaries. Back to the present, Mala asks Yuma why he has come and he replies that he has a deal to propose to the leader Hugo. Then he asks for help to warn him that the Archmage of the Empire, the merchant and the commoner Malin have arrived. He takes the opportunity to challenge Yuma to a duel, and if he wins he will take him to him. So he laughs and tells him seriously it's okay and accepts it. Both face each other powerfully. It's a great combat, and both show me how they have learned and developed their skills with weapons. This time the duel is won by Malin. Yuma accepts his defeat with a smiling face. "You're happy now, old friend?" Malin answers him, smiling too. "Come on, I'll take you to meet the leader." Suddenly the doors of the enclosure open, revealing a long and dark hallway. Quite scary. Of course this scares the merchant much more, and the Archmage takes the opportunity to continue mocking him for being such a coward. At the end of the corridor is another door that leads to a large room inside which sits on a kind of throne the leader of the Black Wolves. Reuben is a tough man without a doubt, with a sandpaper look on the men who visit him. You can appreciate the rough character of that mercenary, and he had demonstrated it being an ogre hunter. He is the only man to win a face-to-face with an ogre. But before the War of the Dragon Horse, he was betrayed by one of the members of his group and killed by a spear in the back. Only cowards do something like that. If Hugo were alive, the number of casualties during the Yangma War would have decreased significantly. Kneeling before this great man in a show of humility and respect, Yuma proceeded to introduce them. Archmage Channel, member of the Empire, and Mr. Fwang, businessman, and I just a commoner, called me Yuma. To which the leader rebuked him, reproached that titles and pronouns are not at all valid in the kingdom, and demanded Yuma to make his request. He asked him if he knew the Murak. These were people who were at the bottom of the social order. Yuma's plan was to use them in something productive and put them to plant and take care of the land of Matin, because it is a dangerous agriculture. Before this proposal the leader told Yuma that he has no problem in sacrificing the weak. After all was destroyed 5 countries in the war, may have been one of the creators of more Murak. That was after all these are prisoners of war, so he was convinced that it would be a good idea, stating that Yuma was born with the qualities of a warrior and the tongue as sharp as that of a nobleman. When leaving the Great Hall, Yuma is tired. The mere presence of the leader Hugo makes him tremble with fear, and mocking his brother for always having to endure him. Later Yuma and Malin have a new duel which is interrupted by a spear that wounds Yuma in the face. The spear was thrown by another man who appears on the scene immediately. Yuma recognizes him as the man who betrayed Reuben in the past that only Yuma remembered. Yuma, while facing him, does not stop thinking about how this man was able to betray and defeat Hugo if he is not so good at fighting. After the fight the brothers leave, but not before Yuma warns Malor to be careful of Kargar. But Malor tells him that there is nothing to worry about. He is a good person. On the way back, Yuma tells the merchant that there is a demand from the leader for him. He must get him a wife or his head will roll. Mr. Fwang is very alarmed because he does not understand what woman will want to be with such a man. Then he came up with the idea of posting a want ad. Ogre Hunter, we are waiting for the right woman. For Captain Hugo, the head of the Black Wolf Corps. If you are interested, please come to the top of Pwong. After a few days, several candidates were presented, but none of them were up to the leader's standards. Most of the applicants are only young girls, daughters of common minor nobles. Yuma and Mr. Fwang talk about the fact that getting married and sharing a bed with Hugo would be a matter of dying, and that it would be difficult to get a candidate willing to do so. Mr. Fwang also comments that if the diamonds take a year to be harvested, he will surely die before that if he does not get the right wife, even though they have bribed several people trying to get a wife. At that moment, another girl named Cindy Mew arrives, a young girl with black hair and emerald green eyes who offers to be Hugo's bride on the condition of making a deal. Yuma asked her what kind of deal she was willing to offer. The girl tells him that she used to work at the gambling brothel on Povian Street dancing and wearing sexy clothes. One day a man told her about a secret warehouse, realizing that she had talked too much and now the man wanted to kill her. So she offered to be the leader's girlfriend in exchange for protection, and she would tell about the secret warehouse in Shirl's house. The merchant is not sure about accepting the deal. It seems to him something very dangerous, while Yuma accepts it without hesitation. Surprised, Fuan tells him that he may be lying, and in fact he is. Really, the girl is not what he indicates, but a spy of the Imperial House, expert in the handling of 5 different swords, was sent by the Empress to get information about the Fwang market. Yuma already knew all this and uses it to his advantage. At night they met Malin and other members of the mercenary group and walked for a while through the forest in the dark and came across a large castle in which there were apparently 5 guards. One of the mercenaries shot an arrow and killed one of them. Now they were evenly matched 4 against 4. They managed to enter the castle by climbing the walls, helped by ropes. The guards who were distracted were attacked without being able to defend themselves. They cover their mouths so that they do not scream for help and pierce them with spears. However, they are discovered by a knight who confronts Yuma. Both fight for a short time and Yuma defeats him quickly. His companions congratulate him proudly. Once inside the fortress, they reach the entrance door to the warehouse. For a moment they wonder how to open it, and the big guy shoots 3 arrows at the same time and breaks it. Inside, a large hoard of gold coins is found. They reach almost to the ceiling. That amount of money will surely help them to finance their plan for at least 2 years. On the way back, Yuma is thinking about another situation he has to solve. The more his plan advances, the more problems will arise. His next target will be Pwang. He must save the nobility. Mr. Fwang got him a letter of recommendation from Sir Haiwan to be part of the vanguard of the Plain of Yanir. Mr. Fwang asks him what was his purpose in going to the battlefield, to which Yuma answers that he needs to get Duran Jack on his side, while he is left thinking about what he can do to get Jack attention. Duran Jack is the person who has contributed most in the wars of the conquests of our empire, is the best fencer of the empire, and is also the figure that has been most compared to the great leader Hugo, is the 3rd most powerful noble of the entire empire. Even the current empress relies heavily on him, is currently the commander of the vanguard in the plain Yanir. After a long journey, Yuma finally arrives at the plain where an old man in charge of weapons gives him a sword and armor. When he was about to walk through the courtyard, some of his fellow soldiers began to make fun of him, saying that he was too pretty to be in the battlefield. Yuma took advantage of the occasion to fight with them and was taken in front of Jack for rebellion. What Yuma did not know was that the recommendation indicated that he could take down 20 men by himself. When he was taken to the military trial, kneeling in front of Jack, he reproached him for having beaten his soldiers, and at the same time he was surprised for not having even a scratch on him. Yuma understood that this was his opportunity to demonstrate his talent and released his mana in front of the knight Jack, who was impressed by his power when he saw him. The assaulted soldiers are upset to see that the commander likes Yuma's potential. At home, Jack wants to know more about the boy but sends him to give him 20 lashes as an example, as well as to see what he is made of, and summons him to his tent. After the lashes, Lieutenant Bake gives him a bomb for the pain. Yuma goes to talk to the commander and both spend the whole night talking. A month later, Yuma was wearing the armor that had been given to him and looked like a soldier leading the charge against the capital of the kingdom, Amad. The riders positioned their horses at the entrance in front of the castle, and the soldiers stationed in front of them were a tremendous threat. Rains of arrows fell on the soldiers, who protected themselves with their shields. At that moment, from the walls of the castle, wizards fired magical attacks. Fortunately, Yuma repelled them with his powerful aura, which made Jack feel proud. "All forward," ordered Yuma. Finally, they managed to conquer the castle. All its occupants were taken as prisoners and are presented to Jack, who is sitting on the throne inside the castle. Yuma approaches the knight Jack to return the sword he had given him a little earlier. The knight was surprised that Yuma was not greedy with the sword and told him that the sword was called a Scalon. It was used by the first son of Duran, Damien Jack. Before returning, the sword was made of steel Saruka, a very scarce material from a remote area. All weapons made with this material can cut anything. In fact, Ascalon also has the antecedent of having killed 2 dragons is at that moment when Yuma agrees to be very greedy with the sword and want it for him. Only Jack replied that he would only give it to him if he accepted to be his adopted son, a matter that Yuma likes, but he must refuse the offer because he likes his home very much. Instead he proposed him to be his disciple. Yuma and the knight set out for the second battlefront where the enemies are not as weak as they are when they arrive at Haseo's army headquarters, the headquarters of the enemy headquarters. After requesting entry, the army commander named Hachu comes out to greet them. The commander Hachu wonders why he should listen to them, to which Jack answers that it would not matter if it was before or after since he will win this war. Jack's intention was to challenge him to a duel, but who would fight would be Yuma. Hachu accepts with the condition that if Yuma loses, Jack will be executed, and agreed. The event both leave the camp. While they return, Yuma questions the actions of the knight, to which he responds that he should calm down, that he will surely die before facing him. After hearing that, Yuma quickly runs to get his sword and the security guards immediately chase him. The commander gives the order to attack to kill. From now on, Yuma's training has begun. Yuma manages to dodge the attacks and hits one of the guards, knocking him unconscious, and then uses him as a human shield. The commander observes the fight while talking to his nephew Randall, a lieutenant in the army. They comment that Yuma is doing very well and that he has not killed any opponent, which is why Randall contradicts him and comments that he would do it, leaving his uncle upset because he would kill his allies. Then he says, "If you come near me from now on, I will kill you." At that, Randall attacks without warning to Yuma, who dodges the blow very well with his defense. Yuma realizes that there are too many opponents and his strategy is to attack the leader, in this case Randall, although it would surely be a more complicated task if he had chosen to fight with 2 swords as is his specialty, only that this underestimates Yuma and decided to fight only with one. Yuma takes the opportunity to create a distraction with his aura and mow Randall down, which gives him an advantage and manages to win the fight. Randall accepts his defeat and asks to be killed because he feels ashamed of having lost the duel. Yuma tells him not to say such things, it was a good fight. The commander sends Yuma to the infirmary to treat the wound on his arm, and in the infirmary Jack tells Yuma that if Randall had fought with 2 swords he would have won the fight. Without warning, the commander attacked Yuma, hitting him and the injured man, causing him severe pain. Afraid to fight in that condition, Yuma covered his entire arm. "You have been immortal and you are afraid of wounds," expressed the commander. "You must have total control of your body and prepare to attack when attacked." That same day during the night, Yuma infiltrates in the commander's tent and tries to assassinate him while he sleeps, without realizing that the commander noticed his presence and surprises him. Avoiding the attack while congratulating him for the good attempt he made, Yuma feels disappointed for not having achieved his goal. After congratulating him, the commander gives him a beating. When he hears the sounds and screams, enters a security guard concerned about the integrity of the commander. Commander Duran hands Yuma over to him like a sack of potatoes, almost passed out, and asks him to take him to sleep since his training will continue in 2 hours. 2 hours later, they look for Yuma again. This time they take him to a field and the commander asks him to count all the herbs one by one using his feet while keeping his eyes closed. Yuma tells him that it is impossible and that he will believe it if he gives him a demonstration. While he was taking off his shoes, the commander said to him, "You are an idiot without faith in your master." When he put his feet on the grass, he released his aura, spreading it all over the field, and Yuma was amazed at the demonstration he was observing. During the first day of training, Yuma could not make it. No matter how hard he tried, he could not release his aura as his master did. The second day, Yuma felt hungry after a long time, and he also could not achieve what his master asked him. On the third day, he felt like a statue. Animals were hovering over him, but he was very concentrated and ignored everything around him. The fourth day, all the energy Yuma had was exhausted, so it was that he fainted on the grass. Suddenly, Yuma finds himself lying on the floor. He seems to have died. He is immersed in some kind of astral travel in his mind. He does not seem to believe that he is dead again. He wonders who has killed him. It would be Jack. He feels a deep sensation of falling into an abyss and constantly repeats to himself that he is going to kill Jack and screams desperately. He seems to wake up from this trance. He would be just dreaming or an astral travel. Next to him is his teacher, Commander Jax. "Oh, it really worked. While I was dead, I thought it was my master who killed me. How could this be possible, Jack?" I tell him that I use ogre blood. They say that their blood can kill someone or save them. Haha, surprised that it will work. The commander just laughs and tells Yuma they can leave. This crazy old man. Anyway, the commander told him, "You have done a good job." Realizing his surroundings, Yuma notices that he had achieved his purpose. He released his aura in the grass all over the field. Yuma, still confused, asks him when all this happened, to which Jack replies, "What now?" and it was time to fight. Now on the battlefield is the entire army of Commander Jack as well as that of his enemies. It is time for the duel of which he was so afraid. Yuma now stands face to face with the captain, Commander Hatchu, the winner. The loser must accept defeat and retreat. If Yuma falls, the hacker commander will lose his head and his soldiers. If Yuma wins, the enemy retreats. Yuma already knew that name since there were three prestigious families in the Empire: the Jack Swordsman, the Povian Magic, and the Rolmandi. Commander Hatchu had faced Shonen Romaldi. In that confrontation, Ronald was nearly killed. Hatchu launches the attack while his brother thinks that the victory will be easy, only that they did not count on the skill of Yuma, who showed his powerful skill and strength, managing to repel the attacks of the Commander Hatchu to the surprise. Before the eyes of all, Yuma had won the duel. The brother of the commander could not believe it. His face of astonishment was in evidence. Approaching Yuma, drawing his sword, he looks at him and tells him that as an older brother he should be in charge of brushing the ashes over the body of his brother who died in an honorable way, at the same time reminding him that he should keep his sword and honor the agreement unless he wants to see the fall of the Heisei kingdom, and thus ended the war. While the imperial army did not shed a drop of blood, tears of helplessness ran down the cheek of the Heisei commander. The news spread quickly throughout the empire, and upon arriving at the palace, the army was received with much euphoria. The empress congratulated Duran. At that moment, Yuma was at his side and both knelt before the empress. During the night, they made a banquet to celebrate the victory inside the palace. From one of the corridors of the palace, Yuma observes the guests as they dance and drink, eat and enjoy the party, and does not stop thinking that not long ago he lived in the palace before the regression and now is a guest. While he is there with a glass of wine, suddenly a lady approaches him. When he turns around, he realizes it is Helen Rose, who approaches Yuma to ask him something. She wanted to know if Lord Duran had really given him ogre's blood, to which the young man responds that yes, indeed, to save Duran's life, and that he had given him ogre's blood. Then the princess understands why Yuma had asked the empress to give him gold blood in exchange as a reward, because it had a high enough cost to buy land. She gets upset and yells at him that he only wants the blood for his own benefits, but Yuma answers that he really wants to study the ogre blood, for which he will need the help of Kaul Phobian. It was then that Lord Kaul sent me to the imperial headquarters, at which point another voice entered the scene. In this case, the first princess, who had already heard this story from Yuma on the wall when he tried to sneak in. This one comes accompanied by Adeline Watts, telling Yuma that if that had not been the man who saved her village. The first princess asks her how many lives Yuma had since he had been saved several times. At that moment, a discussion is generated between the two princesses, something like who has power over whom. I more to distract proposes a toast, to which first princess agrees, taking advantage to play a joke on the young Yumi. Tells him to drink the wine that is in the barrel until she finishes her glass, to which Yuma tells him that he has no problem uncorking a barrel and begins to drink to the bottom, then the second, the third. When it goes for the fourth, all are surprised at the ability of the young man, while the first princess only takes a sip from his glass. Realizing that Yuma had enough resistance, the first princess finished his glass and ended the game. At that moment, the first princess tells Yuma that she should take advantage to show him her skills and abilities, to which her sister objects and tells her that this young man just drank 5 barrels of wine, and she asks her to have a confrontation. The first princess tells her sister that anyone who saw them would think that they are a couple. At the same time, she shouts to her mother, the empress, that if she did not think it was funny what was happening. The mother with indifference replies to her daughter, "Do whatever you want so much to understand that they are a couple." Would think they were a couple. At the same time, she yells at her mother, the empress, that if she did not find what was happening amusing. The mother indifferently replies to the daughter, "Do what you want so much," to imply that she did not care what was happening. She was well distracted talking to Commander Duran. After all, Yuma is facing a duel with Kuna's Romaldi. Both battle for the honor of their respective princesses. The princess, he kisses Yuma's forehead and tells him, "Don't you dare disgrace me." In return, Yomi replies that he is fine, but at the same time, he feels he is intoxicated. His pulse is trembling. He is in no condition to fight. He takes the sword trembling. His opponent carries a great dance. Everyone makes a circle around him to observe the fight above. He warns Yuma that it won't be so easy to beat him, since he had already scored 500 soldiers all by himself while fighting. Both opponents throw blows from the spear and sword. They all clash against each other. Suddenly Yuma's sword breaks. It is evident that this has been prepared, but instead of Firen, Yuma gets upset. He drops the sword and gives him a hard blow to the face, releasing his aura. His opponent falls fainting on the ground. Very upset at this, the first princess says even the first princess asks her mother, the empress, if she saw anything, to which she replies that she did not and that princesses should not grunt in front of other people so much to understand that she was making a spectacle. Her annoyed daughter mocks and says that everyone is blind except her and that her mother feels favoritism for Commander Duran. The empress gives her daughter a slap and tells her that as punishment she will sleep in the bed of a commoner. Her daughter, on the contrary, tells her that she is not 10 years old anymore, that she cannot do that punishment when she sees all the myth. Yuma says that it is her fault for what happened with her sword and offers to accept the responsibility, saving the honor of both princesses of her master and the empress at the same time, action that left a great impression on the nobles. Later in the evening, the captain of the Imperial Guard meets with a mysterious man and tells him that the plan is going according to the ideal. The first princess is becoming unstable. This man is the Grand Duke of Weston, the husband of the empress. Yuma, already calmer in his room, he looks out the window and thinks that he senses something sinister. Back with Lord Fwang, Yuma receives bad news. The kingdoms of Haseo and Helga broke off their business with Lord Fwang. This is in revenge for the death of Commander Tenchu. The Lord weeps disconsolately on the floor. As always, Yuma has a plan and tells Lord Fwang to stay calm. As always, Mr. Fwang is very worried and thinks this is an unnecessary risk, and at night when they arrive at the port they get the men of the caravan. They create a plan and pretend to be merchants. When they get off the carriage, immediately one of the men tells them where they are going, that they must pay to get into which Yuma, without thinking, gave him a hard kick in the chest, this to prove that he was the bodyguard of Mr. Fwang in the end. This is all part of Yuma's plan to gain notoriety and attract the attention of the other merchants. The next day he tells Mr. Fwang that he must play an important role. He must have an arrogant attitude when he meets with the other merchants. When he arrives at Haseo, Mr. Fwang plays his role very well, so much so that the bodyguards of the other merchant go on the attack. But of course I stop them by hitting them and neutralizing them all. And then the grooming merchant approaches him and takes his hand, breaks 2 of his fingers, and tells him that he must bring the biggest fish. Several days go by until they finally manage to meet with the biggest fish, to their surprise. This is a beautiful woman with a tall, slim figure and black hair, also escorted by several guys, who also gives off a pretty good aura while smoking a pipe, and the smoke begins to intoxicate Mr. Fwang, who tries to leave the room coughing. Immediately Yuma unsheathes his sword quickly and cuts the woman's pipe in 2. To her surprise, she realizes that if Yuma had wanted to cut her neck, he would have done it without problem. At that moment the woman's bodyguards go to attack, but she stops them. Of course she realizes that Yuma is not a threat. Despite Yuma's efforts to prevent the man from fainting, he still did, and the woman thinks Yuma will soon do the same. Apparently the pipe gives off a smoke that is poison, but I more let him know that he is immune to this effect. What really surprises the woman, Yuma knows who she is. Immediately she asks him what he wants, to which I reply that first of all he must resume trade with Fwang and taking advantage of the moment. Secondly, that they sell him magic stones at a cheaper price. The woman looks at him surprised and tells him that if those are all the demands he has, and that the woman approaches Yuma and removes the mask that covered his face. The woman does not understand why a man with such a beautiful face hides behind a mask and takes advantage and stole a kiss. Yuma blushes and is surprised. What she did not know is that this woman also has poison in her lips, and that's why she had never been able to kiss any man. That helps because this is immune. Also there are seen in it from his lips. In the end the woman agrees to the requests of Yuma. Just at that moment Mr. Fwang wakes up from his fainting. Yuma tells him that everything has gone well, that now they should go to relax to a tourist place. This place is called Makal, a place full of demons and many magical stones. Upon arriving the entrance of the portal, Yuma kills the guards to be able to break through the doors. As soon as he enters, without realizing it, Yuma steps on a beetle. That I am not me and Amor, very scared, tells him that the mothers of these insects are very maternal and now he will want to seek revenge. So he thinks it is better to turn around and leave the cave. This monster would be able to destroy all toilet just to avenge the death of his son, and that Yuma runs to find a clear place inside the cave to fight against the spiders, but he is kicked by one of the arachnids. Luckily for him, he is unharmed. Under his clothes he was wearing a suit of armor that saved his life. When he realizes, he looks up and sees spider nests there. He knows he has reached the burrow of the mother spider. He then tries to get the spider to come down from the cave and throws a blast of his water which falls on the spider's body but fails to bring it down. He continues dodging the spider's attacks, but it becomes very complicated because there are spider web traps all over the cave, and Yuma understands that the only way to defeat it is to get it to come down. To defeat it is to make it go down. At that point he launches several times in a row bursts of his aura, managing to cut one of the legs of the huge beast. Taking advantage of the advantage, Yuma tries to finish liquidating it, jumps on it with his sword just to nail it in the head. Suddenly the spider looks at him and throws him a power with his gaze. Yuma falls like a kind of trance in his memories, where for some reason Yuma remembers all the bad things that have happened to him. Fortunately, he also remembers the kiss that Princess Helga gave him, and that makes him come back to his senses. Now the warm-up is over, it's time for the real battle. At that moment a battle to the death really begins. Yuma faces this powerful beast, kicks, bites, goes back and forth. Yuma remembers the teachings of his master Durin, then he tries to concentrate all his aura and his human on the sword and transmit all that strength to explode the spider. All that strength to explode the spider from inside. Finally succeeds, but falls fainted soon after. He feels in his mouth a kiss and a liquid and says that hopefully it is a woman, but at the same time tastes like excrement. When he opens his eyes, realizes that it is Natalie, who arrived there thanks to Mr. Fwong, who had run to look for her. Mr. Fwong is happy to see him alive and thanks Natalie because without her he could not have survived if he had not been killed by ogres. The medicine takes effect. Yuma recovers. When he gets up, Yuma sees the corpse of the spider and remembers that this is extremely valuable, begins to collect parts of it and gives it a bag of poison to Natalie, telling her this is the payment for the liquid that saved my life. There is the sect, and tells her that he will put it in alcohol to drink it. Then together Yuma and Mr. Fwong finally they leave the cave, and now they are on the dock looking for the man from before. But he tells them that he is no longer a smuggler. Of course Yuma thinks otherwise, and after a couple of blows makes him change his mind. Once on the boat, Mr. Fwong tells Yuma to take it easy, referring to the merchant union, but I do not listen to him. The idea of this one is to steal one of his business from the dry company that is under the protection of the Ramundi family, and the manager is the bastard son of Hais Ramundi. Arriving back on land, Yuma goes directly to the union in search of his leader when a girl enters the service and opens the door, and he notices that she is beaten in the face. Upon entering, Yuma notices that there are liquor bottles scattered all over the floor. The man who receives him says, "I'm tired, go away, come on, go fuck yourself." Yuma replies to him, "And what if you're not crazy? Then I'll kill you," shouted the man. "Oh, for God, let's see, try it." While the man staggered from drunkenness, the drunken gentleman took out a spear and at once went on top of Yuma, who dodged him very easily and encouraged him to keep trying. At some point Yuma releases his aura and tries to hit the subject in the face, issue that fails to do that. His fist is stopped by another gentleman which bears the name Hais Ramundi, head of the family, who was a talented locker who was never pressed by Durin in cabinet meetings because they were direct rivals. Upon seeing him, Yuma of course pays his respects. Mr. H feels jealous that Durin has made Yuma his pupil, since what would he wish to be his master? Mr. Ramundi reminds Yuma that he must return because he has a pending conversation Zeka again with his master Durin. Yuma asks him to please get him a good wine because he has a client who is very demanding. Of course Mr. Durin did not know who he was referring to. Yuma returns to the place to meet Zeka, saying, "Did you come again?" Yuma gives him the wine he brought him and they start talking, and Zeka tells him a story about a beautiful woman who was in a free meadow under the sun, and after a while Zeka asks Yuma if he knows who he is talking about or what happened to her, to which he replies that he thinks he had raped her. To her surprise, he replies that no, the woman in the story was really his mother. Some time before, his grandparents had gone to complain to Mr. Hais, but he cut the necks of both of them with a single blow of his sword. At that moment Zeka tells him that Mr. Hais is the one who hit them. Suddenly he begins to behave aggressively, grabbing the girl by the arms and shaking her. Yuma immediately realizes that it is really a voice in his head that makes him react that way, grabbing him by the back and throwing him to the ground and asking him to please calm down.